What is this?
Hello there, this is Christy Lewis from Dostoevsky in Space, and welcome to my August wrap-up vlog. This is actually me on the 31st filming to introduce this video because I wasn't planning on making a vlog-style wrap-up when I started this a couple days ago, but then people on Michael's Discord were talking about making Herdazian Chouta, so I decided to just go ahead and make some Herdazian Chouta and show you guys the outcome. If you watch till the end of the vlog, I will tell you how that went, and I'll kind of intersperse footage from my Chouta journey throughout my book reviews that I also filmed for this wrap-up. I hope you enjoy it. I enjoyed making it a lot, although the editing has been time-consuming. Good morning. It is now the 29th of August. I've been spending some time this morning brainstorming. I'm trying to work on a novel that I actually wrote during NaNoWriMo last year. That was my first draft of it, and now I am working on the second draft, and it's slow going, but my writing partners are like nitro fuel for me, so I've just been trying to brainstorm. Here's my computer, and here is my notebook. I really like to brainstorm by hand sometimes, and that's what I've been working on this morning, but now it's time to go to the store and go shopping for the week. And thankfully, I found some inspiration for what I want to make this week from some peeps in Michael's Discord. They were all talking about the Herdazian Chouta, because that was something that we just read about in the last chunk of the Words of Radiance, which we are reading for Stormlong 2020. It's a pretty funny scene. All the bridgemen are like crazy for Chouta because it's like really meaty and really cheap. Everything is fried. It's like good fare for soldiers. So everybody in Michael's group thought it sounded like Mediterranean food. Gyro. That's what they thought. That's kind of what I was picturing, like a hummus sandwich that I would get from Jimmy's. However, the description says that it's covered in gravy. The Mediterranean food does not use gravy. They use lemon and lots of olive oil. So I was trying to figure out gravy on Mediterranean food. The description of it is it's like soul cast meat that's like fried, and fried bread, and there's a gravy over it. So I'm guessing it would be like a spicy gravy. And there's like another grain in it. Obviously none of these foods are earth foods. So I really thought that soul cast food would be kind of like sausage, because sausage is kind of like machine-made meat. That's kind of like soul casting. I mean, soul casting is a machine that you can make things with. So if you're making meat with a machine, it just sounds like sausage to me personally, instead of like hummus or tofu. The first recipe that I even saw online had pork in it. I was like, pork? Okay, pork is cheaper than beef, more filling than chicken or fish, even though Rochar has like a lot of fish. This is from Herdaz. And also, fish would not be as filling as pork. Chicken is cheaper here in our world. However, they have chickens in Rochar, so we know that it's not chicken meat. So I was thinking pork, and they thought it was pork. So I'm gonna just go with pork. I'm gonna make the pork meatballs. You fry them up, you put them in some fried bread. Normally I would make my own naan. However, since this is a first time recipe, I think I'm just gonna buy the naan or pita bread. For the gravy, this recipe just has like a very spicy curry kind of sauce. I'm pretty excited to try this.
First of all, of course, I read half of Words of Radiance by Brandon Sanderson. I read this for Stormlong 2020, which is a read-along I'm doing with some friends who I have linked down below. We're all reading the 3 books leading up to Rhythm of War, and we will be finishing them in November when Rhythm of War is published. So this one, we read half of it last month, we'll finish it in September, and then we'll start Oathbringer in October. And if you want to join us on this journey, it is so much fun. Not only are these fantastic books, but my co-hosts and I have live streams every 2 weeks discussing it, and there's so many fun details in here. As you can tell, I marked quite a few of them. And we have discussion questions, and we just in general have a lot of fun. And I'm telling you guys, you want to know my co-hosts, they are a huge part of why Stormlong 2020 has been such a wonderful experience for me personally, along with the wonderful book and everybody who is talking with us in the live stream chats. Please do join us in the live stream chats if you're at all interested in reading Words of Radiance and you can blow through it in a month, which is totally doable. Or if you want to join us for Oathbringer, I really hope that you will. This is my favorite fantasy. It's very funny and the characters really get to me. And the world building is so extensive and there's just these wonderful details that just really bring you into the world building. Definitely worth reading if you're into high fantasy at all, or if you want to start reading high fantasy. I've heard a lot of people recommend starting with Brandon Sanderson's Mistborn series, and that's where I started. That's probably where I'd recommend you start, but not everybody thinks that. Some people think you should start here, so whatever floats your boat. And actually, the first book that I finished this month was Driftwood by Marie Brennan, and I filmed a clip of it earlier, so I'll just put that right here. This book was published in July 2020. It is a collection of interconnected short stories about the place where worlds go to die. That place is Driftwood. Driftwood is a collection of shattered worlds that are just kind of gathered together in space, like they're a bunch of driftwood just kind of gathered in a bay. And slowly, the worlds towards the middle begin to grind together and disappear. And eventually every world that comes to Driftwood disappears. The center of Driftwood is called the Crush. If you looked at a map of Driftwood, it would be a bunch of concentric circles. And each circle is named according to its proximity to the center, which is called the Crush. The closer a world gets to the Crush, the closer it is to annihilation. The struggle of all the inhabitants of Driftwood in the various dying worlds is to try and be remembered. So they try to keep their cultures alive enough to be remembered in Driftwood. So as you can imagine, Driftwood has become quite a complex weaves of cultures and religions and mythologies. Just so you can get a feel of the world building, I'm going to read you a quote. People out on the edge usually deny it. You've got enough of a world left that you can, but it's fading. Have you noticed that? Shrinking. Bits just vanish. People die or vanish with the bits. And though maybe you're still having kids, some worlds do, some don't, your population shrinks with your world. One day, there's a place on the other side of you where there was only mist. They've had an apocalypse too. Different than yours, probably, but the result is the same. There's a fragment that survives. A fragment that isn't done dying. And it came here like all the rest of them. They fade like you do. And as you fade, you move inward, because the worlds that lie crushward of you are doing the same thing. Eventually, you're just a little ghetto, hardly anything left. And then you reach the Crush, the heart of Driftwood. The last bits vanish, and then there's nothing. You may have heard of the author Marie Brennan before. Her acclaimed pseudo-Victorian memoirs of Lady Trent was a finalist for the Hugo and the Grand Prix, I don't know. Brennan really capitalizes in this book and in her Lady Trent series on her academic background in archaeology, folklore, and cultural anthropology. In each short story of Driftwood, she suggests an entire ancient culture with just a spray of details. A dancing magic of forgetfulness. A mask immortalizing the principles of harmonious bodily proportion. Or an endless ravaging sandstorm at the edge of one world. No one there has seen the mask before. It is carved out of wood and still carries traces of paint in the hollows of its contours, though most of the pigment has worn away. Unlike the abstracted or exaggerated style of many masks, this one has been carved to look as lifelike as possible. Almost a portrait, rendered in wood. A portrait of a man's face, with a high forehead and a full-lipped mouth. Several of Driftwood's short stories have been published before, but when gathering them into this collection, Brennan actually adds 2 epistolary layers and multiple narrators. So the organizing frame of the story actually begins with a first-person storyteller named Last. Last is the only inhabitant of Driftwood who seems to be immortal. His world disappeared long ago, and each story in this collection, which is actually like a story within a story, features Last in some way. His relationship to the members of the world. That's like the thread that connects all the stories. Last. In some of them, he's a guide, in others, he's a god. I mean, he just is represented very variously. I think the subtle shifts of tense and point of view can be confusing, and the mystery of the very ambiguous plot and the narrators, it can be confusing, like I said. However, I think fans of the 5th season by N.K. Jemisin and that style will really appreciate the style of this collection. And it feels very fantasy-esque, very magical, even though you really don't want your world to end up in Driftwood, you also kind of want to end up in Driftwood, if that makes sense. Ultimately, Brennan really manages to capture the cry of like all lost cultures and civilizations in this one book, and that is keep remembering. It actually kind of echoes the Old Testament to me a little bit because it has a lot to do with religion. And in the Old Testament, remember me, remember your history. It's just really, and I feel like Brennan really kind of got that across, and I really appreciate that. For it is only through the telling of our tales that we have a hope of immortality. Well, I'm gonna remember the lost of Driftwood, and I think you will too if you read this book. Hello there guys, I totally forgot to bring my phone with me into the store, so I'm just gonna show you what I ended up getting. I got some beer because you beer batter the meatballs, and I got some pork, and we have some beef if I needed more meat, but that should be plenty for me. And I ended up getting naan. I prefer fresh turmeric root to ground turmeric. I just think ground turmeric has absolutely no taste, but this will give you the fresh color, and I know it's good for you fresh. It's like good for juicing and stuff like that. Got a whole bag of onions, which I'm not gonna hold up because, yeah, too heavy. And some garlic. I did get garlic. This is not garlic. Ginger. I used to make fresh ginger tea like all the time, and I'm kind of looking forward to making fresh ginger and turmeric tea. I got some cilantro, some tomato paste for the curry, some chopped onions. I already have like Madras curry powder, so I got some chipotle pepper as well. And there's a few other spices that I didn't need to buy, so yeah, I'm pretty excited. Oh, and chicken stock. Oh, and barley. I'm gonna use barley, I think, instead of rice for the grain, the special Rosharan grain. So something really funny happened though. When we were in the store, I was looking for MSG, which all I know is that it used to be in a lot of Chinese food, and now everything's like, no MSG added. That's all I really know about it, but the recipe called for MSG. So I went in there looking for some, and I got a lecture. Like, the person that I asked for help to find the MSG, she was like, do you realize how bad that is for you? It's so unhealthy. It's a preservative. You should Google it and see if there's anything else you can get. Like, she was like calling across the store because the first person I asked didn't know. And so he went over to ask somebody else, and that was the lady. And she was like, somebody wants MSG? It was really funny. I've also had a free trial of Scribd for the last month, and I've been reading a biography of Fyodor Dostoevsky, and I'm reading that for 2 different read-alongs. One of those is the History Challenge, which was a wonderful read-along put on in August, and I will link the creators of the read-along down below. I actually had a TBR all planned for the History Challenge, and I just did not get it edited and uploaded, and so I'll just tell you about it here. But first, before we get to that, I want to tell you about a read-along that I am actually going to be involved in, not just doing, but like helping with it. It's actually hosted by Danny from Spinelli Speaks, and I'm so grateful for her for putting in all the work of organizing a Voxer group and a live stream schedule. We're doing like 5 or 6 live streams on her channel, and she has graciously invited me to be in 2 of them. It's just so nice. Crime and Punishment is my favorite book of all time, so you could say I'm excited. We're taking 2 months to read it, so that will be in my TBR section, but I just wanted to say that in preparation for that, because Danny has invited me to speak about Dostoevsky and to kind of introduce him to the readathon, I'm reading this bio, and I'm not going to be able to finish it because it's like 1,700 pages long. I'm not even going to get close to finishing it, but I've learned so much already about Dostoevsky's childhood, and I'll probably sort of skip forward a bit to the section about Crime and Punishment, just so I can be more informed about the book that we are reading. Anyways, I am loving A Writer in His Time. Fabulous book. It's actually really, really easy reading, very interesting to read. He talks a lot about all the writers that are surrounding Dostoevsky, like his influences. It's fascinating, and it's, like I said, it's easy to read. The writing is very clear and it pulls me along. There's constant tension. It's really good storytelling, even though it's true. If you want to join, you are welcome to join and make any videos that you want. It's 2 months long, so you have plenty of time to join and grab a book. I will have the live stream schedule down below in the description, and those will be on Danny's channel. I think I said that. I also read The Overcoat by Nikolai Gogol, and I read that because the Dostoevsky bio mentioned that Gogol was one of Dostoevsky's influences when Dostoevsky was young and developing as a writer. And the story, The Overcoat, it really helped to define a certain movement of Russian literature. And so it seemed important. I mean, it's a short story and it did that much, so I read it and I can see why. What a fantastic short story. It's one of two that I read this month to get more familiar with Dostoevsky's influences, and I completely fell in love with both of these stories. They're literally tied in my mind, although if I had to pick one, The Overcoat might actually win. But they're both wonderful, and I love them both. The other story was Pushkin's The Queen of Spades, also fantastic. Russians were not afraid of mixing the supernatural into their literary fiction. I mean, I wouldn't say no literary fiction does that, but I haven't read very much modern literary fiction that literally has literal elements of the supernatural. I highly recommend these two short stories. I just really, really loved them. And the Codex Cantina actually did a video on The Overcoat. I really loved Gogol's style and the way he described everybody. He just has such a great understanding of people. And I feel like every character in this very short story, he understood them and he portrayed them so that we could understand them with very quick character sketches. And that takes so much skill. I mean, it looks easy maybe if you're just reading it, but that is so hard to do. And it was fascinating. The whole story was just fascinating. I was never bored, not for 1 second. Highly recommended. And The Queen of Spades shocked me because in the Dostoevsky bio, it said that the main character of The Queen of Spades is almost like a precursor to Raskolnikov, who is the main character in Crime and Punishment. And that is so true. They're so similar. I felt like I was reading another story about Raskolnikov, and I loved it. This one was shorter, I believe, than The Overcoat. So if you just want to read one, go check out that one because it's nice and short. Back to the history challenge for a minute. I also started at the beginning of the month listening to The Simple Faith of Mr. Rogers right there. This is such a cute book. It really talks about Mr. Rogers' kind of philosophy of life and the one that he presented to young people, which is that it's okay to have emotions, you just have to learn how to express them. And that's very important, is expressing emotions carefully. He also talks about the value of silence, how every morning he would read the scripture and then pray for people by name, and he would go swim laps every morning, and how he was a vegetarian because he couldn't imagine eating anything that had a mother. I didn't actually really watch him when I was young. My husband loved him. He really emphasized the value of slowing down for kids, which I think is important. Not every kid is going to be super fast, just like not every adult is going to be super fast. I happen to be one of these very slow-moving adults. In his shows, he was always very purposefully vulnerable and just very true and genuine, and he would show himself being not good at something. Like in the show, he would do things that he wasn't good at just to show kids that everything doesn't go perfectly for adults. And that's okay. I think he has a more positive view of humanity than I personally do. Not that he was blind to the negative aspects. I don't think I would say that. He went through some tough stuff. He clearly understood child psychology, and he knew how to present things to children that would really help them develop skills for their lives. I really would like to finish this book. It talks a lot about his faith. I just haven't gotten around to finishing it because I've been listening to other things like Words of Radiance and also Warbreaker. So I'll put a little graphic from the history challenge right here so you can see what I was aiming for. I just hit bio twice, whatever. Just happened to be what worked out for me. I didn't actually finish either of them, so does it equal out to one? This is how I read. I tend to have lots of books going all at once. I just cannot blow through something quickly. It's just not in me. And that's okay. I'm cool with it. One of the other things on the history challenge graphic here was to read some local history. So I went ahead and got an article written by my friend Jan Cook, who works at the library where I worked for several years. Jan is so smart. She's so patient. She's very thorough. And you can really see that in her article. She's a very good researcher. I think she must have spent hours in the microfilm researching for this article that I'm about to talk about. Oh, and she's also a great quilter. She does it all. Jan wrote this article about the Spanish flu in our county, Lake County, California, and I will link it down below so you guys can check it out if you're interested. She wrote this at the very beginning of our current pandemic because I'm sure people were just curious about it. And to me, even though it was really sad reading the research, it was also kind of comforting because we have not had that massive amount of death that they had during the Spanish flu, despite all the precautions they took. However, at the time, even when things were so scary and there were lots of deaths, particularly in like the most deadly month where there was like, I forget what number she used, something crazy. Whoa, you know, people still resisted wearing masks and they still resisted the safety precautions. It's like people just don't change. So I do actually recommend checking out your local history writers. Sometimes they can bring out things that are just fascinating and important. And it can kind of make you feel better about modern society a little bit. And just as a side note, I am an immunosuppressed person, so just know I appreciate you guys who are taking precautions. I also listened to 3 Victorian ghost stories that Kate Howe recorded during Victober, and they're really lovely. She focuses the camera on a candle, and she reads the story, and she has this background music, and when things get creepy, she changes it so that it's super creepy music. I was like taking a bath and listening to it one night, and it got to one of the creepy parts and it was just like,
it was a really tense moment. Why am I listening to this at night?
That story, by the way, was The Phantom Coach by Amelia B. Edwards. That one had the most plot. And I was listening to these because Kate and I are working on a collab along with several other people for Victober, so stay tuned for that. I'm so stoked about it. I also read The Cold Embrace by Mary Elizabeth Braddon. Also delightfully creepy. This is about a young girl and her lover, of course. And the ghostly elements are kind of subtle and they're brought into like everyday life settings, so it's really creepy and wonderful. I really enjoyed both of those. And then she also read Napoleon and the Spectre by Charlotte Bronte. I think history nerds will really appreciate that one. I feel like I didn't quite follow or understand it, and I'm not really sure why, because the other ones just had me enthralled. I don't know, maybe I need to like actually read it with eyes on the page. Also, I loosely reviewed some of Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb because Michael has been doing a Patreon book club, and this was the first book, and I've already read it. I've read the first 3 in the series, and it was really fun to revisit, especially because I didn't have to reread the whole thing. I could just kind of spend a few hours kind of going over it and join the discussion. This story is just so sad and beautiful and absorbing and literary, and I was just watching Michael's review of it, and his thumbnail is so funny, but his description of the book is very apt as well. I will link his review down below if you want to see a more full one, because I'm not really going to give you a full review here. However, it is about an assassin's apprentice named Fitz. Hobb writes his perspective in such a skilled way that you can see his flaws and the flaws of everybody else around him. His assassin teacher, the king, all the princes, and of course there's the king's wit, who is a wonderful character. There's just so many wonderful characters in here, and they're all flawed, and they all need therapy. And I love them, and this is a great book, and I do highly recommend it. I remember when Katie Loves Classic Books read this series, and she was just like enthralled by it, and she loves like literary stuff. She's always reading literary stuff, and she really enjoyed this series. So if you're into the idea of checking out a fantasy that has literary appeal, this is where I would recommend you go. And isn't this a pretty cover? Leslie at the Nerdy Narrative has the same cover, and yeah, cover love. One of my friends, Imogen, from Book Critique, she has a beautiful Instagram for books, a bookstagram, and she was showing her off her copy of The Assassin's Apprentice as well. It's one of the newer ones, although I really do like this one as well. It really does show off what the story feels like. It's very kind of grim and moody, and there are animals in it, and the Buckkeep is behind them. They live in this place called Buckkeep that's on the coast, and actually the coastal setting reminds me of Catan, very much so. Just had all the good feels for me, even though
everybody in the group is like, she's sadistic, which is kind of true.
she's not very nice to her characters, Robin Hobb, I mean. And unfortunately,
Things don't improve.
but everybody seemed to still enjoy it, so there's that one. And Sunday, we're playing Jackbox games. We already tried one out. We tried Quiplash, and I love Quiplash. I'm so excited to play it. Kev's gonna join us, It's gonna be a party, so if you haven't joined Michael's Patreon Discord, you're missing out. Michael, thank you again for setting that up. It's been wonderful. There's just so many fun things going on in Michael's Discord. I highly recommend it. I highly recommend his Patreon. I feel like I might be missing some other stuff that I read. Oh yeah, and I read some of Warbreaker. Let me just briefly say, I'm enjoying Warbreaker. It started off a little bit rocky for me, but the complexity that I really enjoy about Brandon Sanderson's world building and characters actually is there. I think this is just like an earlier book, although I loved Elantris completely. So I don't know. This one, I don't know. I'm enjoying it, but maybe not as much as some of the other Brandon Sandersons I've read, like Elantris. I want to reread Elantris. That one just, it's like in my brain. I just really love that one. And of course, the Stormlight Archives. So anyways, I'm gonna keep on reading that one. I think I'm on like chapter 27, and I really would like to finish that. Actually, if I can, I'd love to finish it in the next couple days now that I'm focused on it, because the Words of Radiance live stream is done. I am getting into it. More thoughts to come.
Hello there guys. Since it is the 7th and I still have not gotten this wrap up out to you, I just decided to go ahead and tell you my thoughts about Warbreaker. I did finish it on like the 2nd or 3rd of September, and the ending redeemed the book for me. I would probably give it somewhere between 3.5 and 4 stars. I really loved the ending. It was a Sanderlanche, as we say, where everything came together and it got really exciting. It took, I don't know, maybe 60% of the book for me to actually be like, okay, now I'm really enjoying it. But at that 60% mark, I was really hooked, and I just finished it in like 2 days, which is pretty fast for me. As is typical for Sanderson books, he explores lots of religions in this book. There's 2 main ones that are explored, and I really enjoyed that. It explores how religions can sometimes believe in the same things, but have like a different take on them. And various characters who are sympathetic do represent those kinds of religions. One of the religious adherents is actually a god who doesn't believe in himself, which is something we see later in Mistborn as well. The plot of the story is about 2 princesses from one kingdom, and they are trying to prevent a war between their kingdom and another. So one of them is sent off to marry the god king of their enemy, and some crazy stuff goes down when she arrives and shortly after when she refuses to obey the rules, as is typical for her personality. And the other sister follows after her sister who was sent off to marry the God King and ostensibly to save her, and she ends up experiencing kind of like an immigrant experience, and it completely changes her. And I really enjoyed that character change because it was totally believable to me. An experience like what she went through really would change a person, and I think Sanderson is really good at portraying character arcs like that. And the end of the book, like I said, is fantastic. I love the battle tactics used. There was a good mystery plot. And like I said, I love where the sisters end up, what ends up happening to them, and what they enact. It's just a fantastic story, and I love that there's some crossover with the Stormlight Archives. And of course, all of the Cosmere worlds. And I do recommend it to Sanderson fans. I think I enjoyed Elantris more, but I'm really glad that I read this.
Okay, and the other thing that I read some of this month was the Threefold Lotus Sutra. I only read about 3 chapters this month, which seems to be my pace with this book. I usually get like 1 or 2, maybe 3 days a month to sit down with this one, and then we discuss it in the Voxer group with Noah, because Noah is wonderful. Noah, everyone who reads it must converse. He knows a lot about Buddhism. This is a Buddhist sutra. It's one of the most famous ones. We're doing a read-along. I will link him and our read-along down below if you want to join us. We're only like just over halfway through, so you're probably a faster reader than me and could easily catch up with us. So if you want to, this is wonderful. It's very slow. It really speaks through images, and you just kind of feel like soaking in it, especially when you kind of understand what's going on thanks to Noah. It just is so peaceful, and I can always use more peace in my life. Victoria from A Musical Bookworm. She is one of my Stormalong 2020 Bridge 4 co-hosts and BookTube besties. Victoria and I are going to have a read-in on her channel. I'm so excited. We're just gonna be sitting together on a live stream, reading. We're just gonna hang out on our channel if you guys want to join us for the live stream, interspersed with the reading sprints, which is a time where you focus on reading. You don't look at your phone, you don't do anything else, you just read. So I'm probably gonna be reading Words of Radiance during that sprint. I don't know what she'll be reading. Maybe Words of Radiance, because it's a few days before our next live stream. So I will be finishing Words of Radiance next month. Dreamer's Pool! Oh my gosh, Ramsey from Rajathon, one of my favorite science fiction and fantasy booktubers. He's joining us for the Crime and Punishment read-along, and he also read Hunchback, The Hunchback of Notre Dame. He was like, this took me months, but I finished it. He's doing a book club in his Discord, and I'm the most terrible member. I'm like literally 2 months behind on a book that I suggested. But I want to read it, and I started it, and honestly, I didn't actually enjoy the beginning. I'm sorry. But I do want to continue reading it because Juliet Marillier, I have read other things by her, but it was all young adult. And I've just heard such good things about her Blackthorn and Grimm series. So a whole bunch of my science fiction and fantasy review friends, when I was blogging, really enjoyed this series. It has the legit support of this SFF reviewer community, and I want to check it out. I know she does historical fantasy, and she does a lot of research, and she's a big time outliner, so I'm expecting good things. It's the character that was falling a little bit flat for me so far. And part of my problem with this one is I don't have an audiobook. Man, I'm so rambly, but it comes from the heart. Okay, I'll stop filming now. I'm gonna go get some dinner now that it's like 10 p.m.
Hey guys, it is Monday the 31st. We spent the day a couple hours away getting my infusion for my autoimmune disease, which is great. It seems to be working pretty well for me these days. The infusion lasts like a couple hours. I just sit in a nice comfy chair, heated chair, and read or whatever I want to do. They won't let my husband in to talk with me now because of COVID. I'm watering my tomatoes right now. Woo. I got a few big ones. And look at my neighbor's yard. They have like the most beautiful yard and garden. And they get rose bushes along here. Whenever I see them, I compliment their Garden of Eden. I wanted to tell you too that I finished the Herdazian Chouta. And it was friggin' delicious. It was the most delicious curry that I've ever made. I've never made a curry that I loved more. And I used to make curry like all the time when I first started learning how to cook more healthy. Curry was my favorite thing to make. So that's saying something. This was a delicious freaking curry. I highly recommend it. I will link the recipe. You should definitely try it. None of the ingredients were too expensive and it was really, really delicious. Not exactly that healthy, but that's okay. Oh, see how orange everything is? That's because we've had the third largest fire in California history, slightly that way. And we had the largest fire in California history that way, like a couple years ago. The Mendocino Complex fire, and this is the, I forget what this one is called, which is silly. It has affected us only by smoke though. The next town over had evacuations, but we weren't evacuated this time. I don't think we were evacuated for the Mendocino Complex fire either. There were some other ones around here where we were. But yeah, every year we pretty much get evacuated now. Didn't used to be like this. It really didn't. It's been like since 2015, every year we've had really bad fires around here. It's very mountainous and there's pine trees everywhere. I think it's just partly the landscape and the heat and the drought. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I really appreciate it.
If you enjoyed this video, please do give me a thumbs up in the corner and subscribe. I'd love to hear from you down in the comments if you've read any of these books, or if you want to read any of these books, or if you want to join any of the read-alongs that I'm doing. Okay, take care, guys. Bye-bye.